The Dean of Talk Radio, Mills Crenshaw.
Welcome to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show. This is the final hour for today. I know there are momentous things going on, and there's even more going on right here in the state of Utah. As you are about to learn, my in-studio guest is Ben McClintock. I'm tempted to ask you if you are a relative, but it was a fictional character, one of my very favorites. I loved the Duke. He and his McClintock character was. It's an unforgettable name.
I'm glad to have it connected to me.
Yeah. All right. You are with defendingutah.org.
Yes, sir.
What the heck is defendingutah.org?
We're a fairly new website, a news website, but that's different than really anything out there. We actually do investigative reporting, something you actually don't see very much on the local
Not
media
in
anymore.
Utah.
We actually go in and we do investigations with interviews, actually going into state and university archives, finding original information, original documents to be able to expose corruption in Utah. We're from a constitutional perspective.
Corruption in Utah?
Impossible, I know.
I know. How could that happen?
And we also recognize that there's, a lot of these things aren't happening on accident. We might even dare call it a conspiracy sometimes. And so we recognize that these things are happening. And so we don't just deal with theories, but we go in there and we document and we show exactly what's going on. We've done exposés on the governor's involvement with Hillary Clinton and the Chinese and some of the topics we're talking about today.
Why is it that the general public is totally illiterate or uninformed about the fact that there is a Clinton-Chinese connection?
Because they think the Desert News is going to tell them everything they need to know.
Yeah. Oh, of course it does. Well, after all, tonight there's a basketball record that's going to be broken.
Oh, good. That's pretty exciting.
Well, we've got to put
that's
first
much more
things
important
first.
than.
But that brings me up to something. Look, if you're going to defend Utah, at least allegedly is part of the United States of America, or at least it was at one time. I'm not sure anymore. But today, some pretty shocking things have happened.
Yeah.
By executive action, the FCC has taken over the Internet, fait accompli, and the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Department, under the direction of El Jefe, are putting a ban on AR-15 ammo.
Aren't we lucky our overlords are watching out for us?
Oh, yeah. If they can get away with this by executive action, by fiat, what's to stop them from banning guns entirely?
Exactly. That's, on principle, nothing.
What the heck are you guys going to do about it?
Well, it's going on right here in Utah, too. I don't know if we talked about it earlier, about the governor saying he's got a phone and a pen, that he's going to just bypass the legislature and enforce his Healthy Utah plan. He thinks he's Obama for the Utah or something.
I think we need to impeach him.
I wish the legislature would have the courage to do so. And that's something that we need to do. Is the first thing to be able to, you say, what are you going to do about it? Well, the first thing is people have to be aware. If everybody is thinking everything's fine, that we're the best managed state and the most conservative state,
yuck.
When all of this garbage is going on, then we have to break through that. And we, frankly, we've just got to make people more aware and then show them that there's a plan, that there's a way out, that you have to first become informed and then you have to become a doer, meaning you've got to expose it and you've got to put pressure on, and you've got to also nullify it in your own private life. If there's something going on, if the government, like with the proposed burn ban, you know what? Burn wood. Do what the founding fathers said and tell the courts to enforce it. Or you do what John Taylor said and you say, I defy the United States. We're not going to defeat tyranny by begging our masters for freedom.
Well, and we can't say pretty please. They work for us. We don't work for them.
Exactly.
And we've forgotten that.
Yeah.
And so have our elected officials, apparently. 801-254-5855 is the number. What is that document you have in front of you?
We've got some bills with, before I'm sorry, I don't want to distract, and that's an important thing we need to get into, but I remembered something you said earlier about people saying that our rights don't come from God.
Yes.
They come from government. I was at the Utah County Planning Commission 2 weeks ago, and one of the commissioners said that your property rights come from zoning.
He should have been grabbed by the scruff of the neck and thrown out of the office.
And along those terms, though, is this attack on property rights that's happening worldwide, nationwide, and here locally through Agenda 21. And I'm going to, I think, shock some people, but there's this big push right now, which is, in theory, a good idea of taking our lands back from the federal government. Totally in favor of that. When we go through this, don't get me wrong. Don't think that I'm against taking our lands back from the feds. But going back to that, we don't ask for it. We do it.
Yes.
And
yes.
There's a big push. A few years ago, there was the Transfer of Public Lands Act of 2012. And that was sold to Utahns as a way to get our lands back from the feds. I remember last December, the federal government was supposed to respond and give us our lands back or else, right? Well, what has Utah done since then? Have we filed a lawsuit or anything? I mean, it's frankly ridiculous. We haven't, we gave them 2 years to respond, and they ignored us. Of course they did. And that was the intent, and I think I can document that was the intent from the very beginning. Article 3, Section 2 of the Utah State Constitution says that the people, quote, inhabiting the state do affirm and declare that they forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands lying within the boundaries hereof, and to all lands laying within said limits owned or held by any Indian tribes, and that until the title thereto shall be extinguished by the United States, the same shall be and remain subject to the disposition of the United States. So it's a part of our Constitution. Sadly, it's there. I was reading through.
Well, how difficult would it be to rewrite our Constitution?
That's the first step. And so fake lawsuits, that should have been the first thing. And we've talked to legislators, and they admit it. They say, yeah, that's what we need to do. That's the Article 3, Section 2 of the state Constitution has to be changed. We've got to do that first. And then we can just tell the government, you know what, this is our land.
Yeah. Get off.
We're going to tell the sheriffs to go over there and arrest any federal agent that's on there. That's what needs to be done first. And the fact that that's a part of our state constitution, the response that we get from the American Lands Council to that is they use this legalese, this doublespeak, where they say, well, they talk about the enabling acts of different states. And they compare, they say, like the Enabling Act of North Dakota and the Enabling Act of Utah are identical. And they use that same language I just read, which is true, but that's irrelevant to what we're talking about. The Enabling Act is different than the state constitution.
Well, not only that, but the Enabling Act was then, and the Constitution is now.
Exactly.
And we have a right to change our Constitution.
We do, exactly. And so, but the fact that North Dakota doesn't have that in their Constitution, that's why they didn't have the problem of getting the land back from the feds. We have it as part of our Constitution, and we need to have it removed. So that's the first part, and that's really what led us on this kind of rabbit trail to find out what was really going on, because we knew that they knew that the lawsuit was a fraud from the very beginning. That was what our view was on the matter. And so we looked through the bill, and some language referring to Agenda 21 started to pop up, and that really piqued our interest. For any of the listeners that might not know what Agenda 21
Hasn't the governor tacitly approved of Agenda 21?
I wouldn't say tacitly. I would say full force through Envision Utah. It's directly linked to Agenda 21. And through UCARE as well, through those two entities, the state government is enforcing in a direct violation of HJR 11, which was passed a couple of years back, which put the state of Utah directly opposed to Agenda 21.
And yet, our elected officials are supporting it.
They're ignoring the law once again.
Surprise, surprise.
And so what's interesting is they ignore those laws, But when it comes to taking our lands back, do they ignore those laws and defend freedom? They only ignore the laws when it comes to enforcing tyranny, not to enforcing freedom. And so we were digging into it, and we looked, and so HJR was it 13? HJR 11, I'm sorry, in 2013, laid out what the state of Utah admitted was linked to Agenda 21. And for those listeners that might not be aware of Agenda 21, just Google it. There's leftists and there's people on the left and the right that are opposed to Agenda 21 because it affects family, it affects property rights. And when I was at it was interesting, when I was at the Utah County Council meeting, that they were saying that their whole purpose of zoning is to get people and push them into the cities. They don't want you out in the country. And they admitted that just right out there. And they've said sustainable development, green space, those are all buzzwords connected to Agenda 21. And they're trying to basically make things off limits to human usage completely. In Seattle,
yeah, we've got to protect the jackrabbits.
They're about to go extinct, right? And the extinct, the endangered sagebrush, right?
No, the taxpayers, the extinct animal.
In Seattle, they passed a law called the 1492 statute, making 60% of your property, if you lived in rural King County, illegal to develop. You had to leave it. 60% of your land, you couldn't even mow the lawn. You couldn't develop it. You had to leave it in pristine condition, untouched, back to 1492 status. And that's the kind of stuff that goes along with Agenda 21.
That's insane.
And that's exactly what they're trying to do in Utah. And so there were some good patriots that were able to work with the legislature and get them to pass HJR 11, and that recognized Agenda 21 as a threat, and that said it says that Utah state agencies and political subdivisions are not to adopt or implement policy recommendations that deliberately or inadvertently infringe or restrict private property rights or without due process. And so they go through and they label different things as being linked to Agenda 21. And so they really gave us a really good groundwork to go by to be able to identify state programs, county programs, city programs that are implementing Agenda 21. And sadly, we found over and over again that the lands bill was actually implementing Agenda 21 here in Utah. There
are organizations here in the state of Utah who are actively engaged in fighting this. Why is it that we are getting resistance from our own elected officials? What are their excuses
for resisting
the efforts to do away with Agenda 21?
A lot of them are involved with it, and they've got either a financial interest or a political interest to take away lands from people and to implement this anti-liberty agenda.
Ben, what you and your group are doing, I think, is very, very important. The rest of us, on a day-to-day basis, we're fighting all kinds of battles.
Yeah.
And we don't really see a lot of these things that you're seeing.
Right.
And I think what you're doing in making this public is very important. I want you to know that you've got access to this show.
Thank you.
When you have anything that you come across that you think endangers our liberties, I want to hear from you.
Appreciate it. Great.
And by the way, I want all of the audience to feel free to call in, and if you have questions for Ben McClintock or his organization Defend Utah, defendingutah.org, wanted to get it correct. Telephone number 801-254-5855. It appears to me that on a national basis, there is a clear effort to cover up any story that doesn't go along with the grinding out of the new agenda to take over America.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to ask you if you've come across something similar here in the state of Utah.
Okay.
There's a story that a national talk show host said, and this is a direct quote, if this story disappears, you will know the government is being run by the worst kind of people. Now, that was his warning, okay? Mm-hmm. Here's the story. The State Department's Director of Counterterrorism was arrested for soliciting a juvenile. And if that story disappears, we're warned, we'll know that the government is being run by the worst kind of people. Have you heard that story before?
I hadn't heard that story before.
Nor had I. Now, is anything like that going on here in the state of Utah?
Well, we know that it's going on in the state of Utah. Back in the early 90s, there was the Glenn Pace memo that, I don't know if you've heard about, that released that there was high-ranking officials throughout government and religious institutions that were doing those same exact type things. And so we absolutely do know that that's happening here in Utah.
And apparently the press is complicit in covering it.
They're most likely a part of it. We did a story on a man that had his guns taken from him in Utah County before charges were even filed against him. And the media interviewed all of his neighbors, and they laughed. They laughed at how funny that the charges were against him when they finally came out because they were so ridiculous. And the media totally covered up all of those interviews with those that knew him and only used the interviews with the police. Well, they used one short clip from one of his neighbors, but focused on exactly what the government's line was. And so the media is complicit with the government's version of events.
And that's Utah media.
That's Utah media.
Okay. I had a similar experience quite recently. I got a call from two separate nurses who indicated that there were Ebola patients here in a major hospital in the state of Utah. And because they were my callers, I notified members of the media. Not a word.
Yeah.
Not a word.
Yeah.
Not even the allegation. Silence.
Yep. Nobody wants to. They don't want to look into it. They won't. They don't want to either take the time, or if the evidence is presented to them, they refuse to touch it.
We're in trouble, Ben.
We are. That's why individuals need to stand up. They need to start doing what we're doing. Be investigative journalists. Support what people that are doing it are doing if they can't be a part of it. There's many things that people can do, but we've got to start doing it. We can't just sit back on our laurels anymore. It's come to a point where we've actually got to start getting off our butts and not just typing on Facebook and complaining, but actually starting to do something.
Well, tell me about defendingutah.org. Is it more than just Ben McClintock?
We've got several people that have it was started by a colleague of mine, a friend of mine named Shazad Qureshi, and I got together and said we need to focus on how things, everybody talks about politics being local. And we recognize that there are people that are doing wicked things locally, and so, but nobody was focusing on it. Everybody was focusing nationally, and so how can we handle this locally? And so we got together. He's kind of the tech guy, and he did a lot of the research. A lot of the research on this lands bill is most of the research on this lands bill. And so together, I've got a history of working with grassroots organizers and also of investigative journalism and writing. And so we got together, and with others, we've got Scott Bradley, who's also appeared in our website, as well as others, working together to defend liberty in Utah.
Badly needed. And I think we've fallen into complacency. We think right here in the mountains of Zion that all is well.
That's right. Joseph Fielding Smith said that Satan rules the earth today. It's not the kings or the presidents, but it's these people are Gadianton robbers. Yeah, they are. And it's starting to become so blatant, and the fact that people just sit there and take it really worries me. It is. Anybody that doesn't stand up when they see these evil things going on is complicit.
And for those of you who are not really familiar with that word, it means you are part of the problem. You are guilty. And it's true. Sad, but true. Telephone number 801-254-5855. I have just allowed ourselves to go through a commercial without the break. My error. I apologize for that. Let me throw in a quick word for goldandsilverdirect.com. Once again, we have made a special arrangement with the Mint. We've been working for this for some time. And for a short period of time, if you have ever done business with us in the past, you will have already qualified. If you have never done business with us in the past and you're going to be buying $5,000 worth or more of precious metals, you will qualify to buy it at wholesale prices. And the difference is enormous. One order I put in yesterday, just yesterday, for the same amount this client had spent. They got 1,000 10th-ounce rounds. This order, for the identical amount of money, they got 1,900. That's the kind of difference we're talking about. Don't put it off. As soon as the show is over, call me. The number is 801-706-2256. Again, 801-706-2256. Okay, I used the example of this individual from the State Department, the Director of Counterterrorism, for heck's sake, who...
Is he still alive?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the point is, nobody's hearing the story.
Right. How old is that?
Today.
Today, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And by the time we get it, it's usually at least a day old.
Yeah.
What's next?
So just continuing on that, the lands bill, not only is it a violation of Article 3 of the state constitution, it actually enforces Agenda 21. The bill creates the lands bill back from 2012, the Transfer of Public Lands Act, created a commission, which kind of like the Patriot Act, right? They always give these popular, these grandiose names for these horrible things. They created this council called the Constitutional Defense Council. Isn't that great?
Sounds wonderful.
But this council that was created by this bill puts recommendations on how to get our lands back, on how to beg our masters for our lands back. And it urged the lands transfer scheme that the Agenda 21 linked Luray McAllister Critical Land Conservation Fund receive significantly increased funding. So that's how we're going to get our lands back, by giving this Agenda 21 linked organization increased funding, according to this council created by the Lands Transfer Act. The council also directs, quote, prior to any transfer of lands, pre-designate wilderness or other conservation areas. So again, a part of taking our lands back, so like in the movie The Patriot, we're trading one group of masters for 3,000 miles away for a group of masters 30 miles away. And along those lines, it was actually asked of the American Lands Council on a video that they produced about the dangers of wild lands. And individual named Bliss 2, people probably recognize that name. He's the original field director for the John Birch Society in Utah. He actually asked them, he said, but it appears that the HB 148, which is the Lands Transfer Act, keeps the wilderness designations intact. And so the response from the American Lands Council was, quote, you're right. And that is frustrating to us, even though Ken, meaning Ken Ivory, is the one who drafted the bill. She said the only reason that is in there is because at the time, no one would sign off on the bill without that in there. Now, that's malarkey. That's just an excuse that's always used in there. We can't do we have to implement Agenda 21 because nobody in the legislature...
Ken Ivory has a long history of being involved in these socialist schemes.
I'm glad that you recognize that, because that's something that people bring up, is he's kind of a sacred cow among some conservatives, but he's actually one of the biggest opponents we have in nullification. He fights against it. When we had bills to nullify Obamacare, it was him working behind the scenes, getting legislators to stop writing those bills. And when finally we found somebody to put it in there, he went behind the scenes and got a member of a committee to introduce a amendment that scrapped the entire nullification bill and made it about Medicaid expansion. And so we've dealt with him time and time again with wanting to destroy the Constitution through a constitutional convention. Just time and time again working to destroy liberty, while in public he gives these great talks about taking our lands back from the feds. But when you look at actions, I believe it's something completely different.
Sounds like Trojan horse.
That's exactly what we think it is. We're being sold that we're taking our lands back, when it's actually time and time again throughout the study is implementing Agenda 21 through wilderness and conservation areas. Another part of it says that they need to study key conservation areas or ecosystems within Utah that may be transferred to nonprofit environmental organizations for management. So giving them over to, again, these NGOs to manage Utah lands and keep them off limits to Utahns again. This is not about taking our lands back. This is about implementing Agenda 21 that the federal government can't do. It's only something that can be imposed locally through soft law, and then it gets implemented through hard law through the states and counties and cities.
Why have, pardon me, why have conservatives like our governor, at least I thought he was a conservative, why are they suddenly turning pro-federal government?
I don't think it's sudden. You look at Governor Herbert, and where did he originate from? Who was he the lieutenant governor of? Where the media is masterful at presenting to us false leaders to follow, to be able to implement their agenda. And so they promote these fake left and right paradigm. That's why the motto of defendingutah.org is think right and wrong, not right and left, because we're presented with these fake left-right paradigms all the time, and we support these people that the media told us was a staunch conservative. And when it comes down to it, when you actually look at what they did, it was empowering the federal government. It was taking away individual liberty.
And we're at a crossroads. I'm going to share with you something that is very much on my mind and on the minds of my listeners to some extent, because through the last couple of years I've been quoting experts. I am not a financial expert, and I make that very clear. None of these predictions come from Crenshaw.
Okay.
But these experts are talking about a decided plan to collapse the economy of the United States. Not some distant future, but in September or October of this year. They're talking about bank closures, the collapse of the U.S. dollar, about our losing our currency because it has already been decided internationally that as of September or October of this year, the United States dollar will cease to be the reserve currency of the world. Now, it happened to Great Britain, and the man who was behind it is well known. He's a United States citizen, and he bet against the British pound. And now he has placed the largest bet against the U.S. dollar in history.
Wow.
And I believe it's really coming. I think we're going to see economic collapse in this country. And we have these fellow travelers in the governor's office, apparently, who are playing footsie.
Oh, they're playing more than footsie. They're deep in bed. But it's something, it's kind of hard, because I remember last September people said similar things, and so timing isn't always right, but it is. It's like gravity. When you start this Federal Reserve System, it's like throwing up a ball. You're not maybe sure when it's going to come down, but it's coming down. And, we've got Obama administration officials saying that they plan on crashing the economy. So, yeah, I agree it's coming. Timing-wise, that's a little bit more fuzzy.
Well, today, unilateral action by the president using executive powers, ATF has decided they're going to declare war on the AR-15.
Yep.
And they're banning certain ammunition to start with.
And they're also proposing bans on personal body armor as well.
Yeah. Why?
Well, you got to put two and two together. Well, I mean, what other reasons would there be?
The only thing I can think of is they're afraid of the people. And if they're afraid of the people, they've got something in their minds that we're not going to like. And that part of it is scary.
Yeah.
And then, again...
And Governor Herbert is behind a lot of these gun things. He was the one that crushed our federal gun legislation nullification bills. He was the one that vetoed our constitutional carry bill. And then our legislature was too cowardly to actually override the veto, even though they had the votes. So we've got a collusion between the state and federal government working to destroy our freedom.
Where are the champions when we need them?
Hopefully we've got some talking right here on the radio, and we've got some listeners that will stand up and do what it takes.
It's really pretty scary when we have a situation where Obama bans certain bullets. He talks about the fact that the FCC now is going to take over the internet, and they're going to treat it as a, quote, utility, which means they can do anything they dang well please, and we can't even replace the majority on the FCC for 2 years.
And you've got to pass it before you can read it. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah, unfortunately.
They call themselves progressives, but they actually use time-tested arguments. They're Trotskyites. They go back to arguments and plans that are hundreds, if not eons, old.
Well, Ben, I'm tickled to find out that defendingutah.org exists, because talk show hosts try and stay on top of these things.
Yeah,
but we miss a lot.
It's impossible to stay on top of it all.
And I'm going to welcome input from your organization anytime.
Thank you.
We're coming up on a break in just a couple of minutes, and after that break, we're going to have about 12 minutes left. And I want to invite the audience to ask questions. I think, as I am, I think a lot of people out there are maybe surprised to even find out the organization exists, but it's a welcome addition.
We're pretty new.
Telephone number, 801-254-5855. Again, 801-254-5855. Your calls for Ben McClintock. Speaking of Ben Carson was very interesting. He was speaking to a very prominent black group. And he said, if you're black and you oppose the progressive agenda and you're pro-life and you're pro-family, then they don't know what to call you. And it was very interesting because he's a retired pediatric neurosurgeon of great renown. And he is an individual who doesn't mince words. And we need more people like him. Caller, your first name, please.
Randy O.
Welcome. You're on.
I just want to ask your guest, Ben, if he's done any investigation on the shirtless scandal.
Oh, good question.
That's a good question. That's actually one we haven't looked into a lot. That's something we probably should look into more. We've seen a lot of fishy things going on there.
Yeah, well, I wish you would, but I just wanted to ask. So,
well, I guarantee you, if they do investigate and they find anything, he's going to be welcome here to share it with everybody.
Thank you.
Well, I think there's things that are being hit, from the articles you read in the paper. And I'd like to see somebody get to the bottom of it. But thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. We'll be right back. You're listening to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show, right after this short break. We'll welcome your calls to Ben McClintock. You're listening to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show on KTALK. Ben McClintock from DefendingUtah.org is my in-studio guest. Tell us, Ben, what you've discovered about the governor's connection with China.
Yeah, that's something that probably a lot of people don't know about. There was actually a shutdown of American media there. The only, well, not the only one, but they banned American media from being there, but they invited the official Chinese Communist press to be there. They had a big conference where the governor teamed up with Hillary Clinton to bring together
Hillary?
Oh yeah, and they brought together all 50 governors of the United States with the provincial governors of China, and brought them together to make unconstitutional treaties with each other. To like I don't know, probably heard a couple years ago about Idaho giving a beachhead sovereign territory to the Chinese to set up a plant there in Idaho, and setting up different things across the country to be able to set up these same type of beachheads all across the United States.
But those beachheads could be used to bring in troops.
That's exactly what a beachhead means. And that's interesting. You look at, I don't know if your listeners have heard about the Canamex Corridor. It's Utah's version of the NAFTA Superhighway. Starts in the west coast of Mexico at a port owned by the Chinese government. Then it goes through Arizona, over the Hoover Dam in Nevada, Arizona, and up through I-15 as a part of that Canamex Corridor. And so right along this corridor, you see strategic placement of Chinese companies that from the very beginning to the very end of this corridor. And so it was and when...
of course, they're not armed.
Oh, never. Guns are banned, right? But and so when they had this conference, again, I want to reemphasize that was the governor teamed up with Hillary Clinton and the Chi-Coms to bring this event together here in Utah. And when an American media company called The New American wanted to cover the event, they stripped them of their credentials and didn't allow them to cover the event. And the only media in Utah, sadly, is the liberal Salt Lake Tribune that actually covered the event. They didn't cover the event. They covered the banning of American media from the event. Nobody else even talked about it, except for in brief mentions of the event itself, that the governor was working with the Chinese for business interests.
And the governor's proud of this?
Yeah, absolutely, he's proud of it. They did a big puff piece about how great it was going to be for Utah business.
In what way?
Because it was a setting up trade between the Chinese and Utahns. And that's something that Karl Marx said, that man was an economic beast. And so when somebody sets up economic interests above personal liberty, they're actually espousing Marxism.
Caller, your first name, please.
This is Rick from Salt Lake.
Yes, Rick.
I wanted to ask your guest, who he's a really good guest. I'm really enjoying the show. Very informative. But anyway, if he knows that there's a free trade zone here in Salt Lake, it's about 7th South, and I think it's like 48th West. It's near the Salt Lake, that airport thing down there on the North Temple. Anyway, it's owned by the Rockefellers, and it's a free trade zone, I think, similar to what they have in Boise. It hasn't been developed yet, but there's signs there. Was he aware of that?
Could you send me an email, ben@defendingutah.org, and I'll look into that. That's really interesting. And that's
I call it a free trade zone, FTZ.
Yeah, yes. I'll look into that and send me an email.
Okay, thank you.
Looking into these things is really important. It's something that we like to do, and we like to do a podcast, and we do printing, and we do the website. And to help us out to be able to do more of that and get the word out more, if you can donate at defendingutah.org, every donation actually gets entered to a drawing for a lifetime membership at Front Sight Weapons Training. That's a $15,000 value that all donors will be entered into to win, to be able to help us to do these types of investigations, to be able to get the word out in different mediums. And that would be a real big help if anybody could do that. But if you've got tips, also send us to ben@defendingutah.org. And so that's something that we want to look into. One of the callers mentioned about Shurtleff, and that reminded me of an article that I saw about him actually being linked and exposed as going to these underground nightclub parties in New York and being schmoozed by a lot of these underground type folks. And this is the kind of stuff that's going on.
when you say underground nightclubs, are you talking about criminal element?
Yeah, that's what the article was inferring, yeah. The FBI investigation is what it was reporting on, was the FBI report.
So he was being schmoozed by allegedly gangsters.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I don't know what there is about this state. We allow government to run roughshod over us when individualism is really the key.
Right. We've got this weird paradigm in our heads of being submissive to government, obeying the law of the land, but this other paradigm of individual liberty. And sometimes they clash. And so I think also because we're a good, wholesome folk, we don't think anybody could do that. We know these people. We don't believe that these guys could ever do something so horrible when they really are. And we kind of make excuses for people that we would never make excuses for if they were, if they were of the other party or if they were out from outside the state. We make excuses that we really shouldn't make. We need to go by principles and not by personalities.
Have you ever heard of a man by the name of Lindsey Williams?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I'll come back to that. Let's take the call. Caller, your first name, please.
Daniel.
You're on.
Have you guys heard about the veterans courts they're pushing at the legislature?
I have not.
I have not either.
You might want to take a look at utgunrights.com. They just did a story today on it.
Thank you. I'll go look at that.
What is the background on this? What should we be looking for?
They're establishing veterans courts modeled after drug courts, where they would take veterans in, and it doesn't appear to be voluntarily. They would take veterans in and essentially turn it into a communist kangaroo court where all of the prosecution and the defense and the state agencies and the VA and the judge all sit around together and come up with a treatment plan for veterans. It's really just they called it veteran disarmament courts, and I think that's appropriate. It's a communist model taken from the old Soviet Union, and they want to apply it to these veterans, and it's all part of the ongoing effort to disarm veterans.
Well, of course, because to the left-wing media, veterans are the biggest threat in the United States, not ISIS.
It's a scary bill. I've been watching.
What's the bill number?
Myself, it's SB 214.
Okay, I'll look at that. Thank you.
You bet. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate that call. Yep. Who else out there has something that Ben and his organization should be looking into? I think this is very valuable because collectively this audience has access to information that just isn't available anyplace else. 801-254-5855. We've got still time for a couple more calls. Anything you're working on right now that we should know about?
I don't want to give all the details because we've got some contacts that we don't want to scare off. But we've actually been able to link this group of secret combinations here in Utah that actually I've been able to document from 1883 that operates to today. And they're distinguished in their plan and their stated purpose is to bring Utah and make it just like the rest of the world in any way that we're different, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's becoming, being subservient to the federal government. It's their job is to infiltrate into the different organizations and to get them to be a part of this.
Is there a name for the organization?
There is, but I want to keep that until we can get all our ducks in a row. And I've got some more documents that we're trying to get from the state archives and trying to do some grammar requests. Don't want to scare it off, but I just wanted to kind of maybe make that a tease to have people stay tuned. And
oh yeah, this is a story we want to hear. Caller, your first name, please.
No, this is Abe.
Yes, Abe. Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to ask the guy, he mentioned that wood ban bill. Does he know exactly where we're at on that one?
Yes, they actually, because of great patriots across the strait, stood up against the gangsters in government and told them we're not going to take it. They actually withdrew their proposal.
So we're back to the old, just on the red days?
Exactly. Nothing's changed.
Okay, man. Okay, now the other thing I wanted to ask you, what is your position, and we won't have time to go into it, because I'm pretty sure when you said you were Scott Bradley, you're on the wrong side of the fence, but on the state convention?
No, Scott Bradley's great.
Huh?
Scott Bradley's great.
On the state convention?
On the Constitutional Convention, yeah.
Yeah, well, he's wrong.
I'd strongly disagree.
Well, let me ask you something. How do you like the Constitution?
That's why I don't want to change it.
Well, wait a minute. Don't answer it that way. Do you like the Constitution?
That's why I don't want to change it.
That was a state convention, by the way.
Excuse me?
Do you like the Bill of Rights?
That's why I don't want to change them.
That was a state convention, by the way.
That was not an Article 5 convention.
Yes, it was.
The facts
Whoa.
don't show that. You look at the history, and that was not an Article 5. That was the federal government submitting it to the states. It was part of an agreement when they did the original Articles of Confederation Constitutional Convention, but it was actually passed in the normal way. Every 27 amendments were passed the same way. And opening this up is blaming the Constitution. Why are you blaming the Constitution for being violated? It's the gangsters in government that are violating the Constitution. The Constitution is not the problem. And the people that are supporting Article 5 are the ones that are pushing the Constitution as being the problem. When it's the gangsters in government that are violating it, we need to stop blaming the victim being the Constitution and start enforcing it through the 10th Amendment and nullification. But no, all the Article 5 organizations fight against nullification because they only want to open us up to a convention and give the federal government more and more power, which all the amendments do.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Okay?
Go ahead.
Because I'd like to get a word in, too. I mean, you can
go ahead.
Me.
Ask.
Okay, what I'm going to ask you, you ever read the preamble to the Bill of Rights?
I'm sure I have. Remind me what the words are.
Well, you ought to, I wish I had it right in front of me here. It'd take me a minute to find. Anyways, the very last paragraph in that there is it was called by the states that under the Article 5 Convention, and actually it was introduced back to the Congress 2 years after the Constitution was ratified, and it was not ratified actually till 4 years after the Constitution was ratified, and that is a convention called by the states.
That's not what the history shows.
Huh?
I'm sorry, I disagree. That's what the history shows.
Well, you ought to go read it before you say that.
I've studied the Article 5 Convention for over a decade.
All right. Well, read the preamble to the Bill of Rights.
Thank you.
What the state said. Okay.
I'll do that.
Hey, Mills, if you would read it over the air one time, and all
right, I will. I can't today because we're totally out of time, but I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ben, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mills.
And thank you for the organization. I think it's well-founded, and you've got an audience here anytime.
Appreciate it.
Stay tuned. Kyle 2K coming up next right here on KTALK. You're listening to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show. And we've got lots more. Tomorrow is Friday, and, of course, that means Open Phone Friday. Anything you want to discuss within the bounds of good taste, of course, is fair game. And I really appreciate all your being here. And, Ben, you've opened my eyes to the fact that there are some good people working out there to try and keep things in check. Kyle 2K coming up next. Don't miss a minute.
Why do we sit down when all should be standing? And why do we back down at the critical moment, like running away from the waves of the ocean. We head for the hills with the high tide approaching, as sand slips away from the castle. When it's time to stand upright, why do we falter? Like placing our freedom on the sacrificial altar. We hold tight to our fears and defend our oppressors, as we fight for their lives and become the transgressors. As pacifists transform to violent aggressors. But I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and they say I can't change all the things I find strange. But what can one man do alone? They say, what can one man do alone? When is the right time to stand up for freedom? Could it be when you start to feel creating children who'll inherit the pain and the debt of this nation, and be slaves to the banks that cause hyperinflation, who are masters of commerce, lies, and bad legislation? Whoa, if you looked in the eyes of 1,000 young children through fences of razors, their innocence stolen, as the red flag of tyranny flies in the open, is that when you finally notice? Whoa, whoa, but I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and they say I can't change all the things I find strange. For what can one man do alone? Is what can one man do alone? I'm only a stranger looking to find better nature in my fellow man, but they keep telling me it's a sin to be free, and that's more than I'm willing to stand. Where will you be when the order is given to censor your mind, as free speech is forbidden, as martyrs for peace from the world will be driven away by the sound of a bellowing thunder, and choke on the blood of a dream going under, as arrogant men tear up our Constitution, and from every direction we cry revolution, standing together and without permission, soldiers for truth in the war of attrition, the love of our country as our ammunition. Oh, but I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and I'm going to change all the things I find strange, for I am not one man alone. Yes, I'm only a stranger. I'm a long, long way from my home, and I'm going to change all the things I find strange.